What's up, Ego Hackers? Welcome to CS Joseph Podcast. I'm your host, CS Joseph. This is Season 35, Episode 5. What are the God functions of the Mind Temple? An episode of Mind Temple. I love Mind Temple. Mind Temple gives me something to live for because I have natural enmity with them. Natural enmity with those who think they know best. 1 minute, 20 seconds. So, Mind Temple. I have natural enmity with Mind Temple because I am Heart Temple. Mind Temple God functions are, guess what? Introverted thinking and extroverted sensing. Introverted thinking attached to the cognitive origin of validation, and extroverted sensing attached to the cognitive origin of authority, also known as power. When combining TI and SE as God functions, Mind Temple types, and the Mind Temple types are ESTJ, INFP, ENFJ, and ISTP. The Mind Temple has this perspective over humanity such that they maintain that they know best. They know best. And that's why Mind Temple always ends up rising to power. Mind Temple ends up ultimately controlling society. You go look at the local school board. You go look at the county council, city council, state representatives, state legislature. It doesn't matter. They're infested with Mind Temple. And yes, it is an infestation because the majority of them are Mind Temple types with their Mind Temple perspective that they push on everyone else and they enforce on everyone else. This is why my temple, the Heart Temple, the temple of the pursuit of happiness, right? All about personal freedom and acceptability and having a happy life. Personal freedom and happiness is all about the Heart Temple. And it is the Heart Temple that ends up creating revolution to rise up against the Mind Temple and put the Mind Temple in its place. Hence the endless waltz of war that we as humanity face over and over and over. If you want to learn more about the Endless Waltz, I recommend watching the film Gundam Wing, Endless Waltz, which actually explores this warlike concept within the context of humanity. And how humanity will always be at war. Why? It's always revolution against the Mind Temple. The Heart Temple ends up obliterating the Mind Temple, creating a new world, a new society, a new life, only for Mind Temple, like a disease, like a decay, like a virus, like a cancer, to eventually take over society and corrupt it, because from their perspective, they know best. They're the people who are the most credible. And that credibility is very appealing to Soul Temple. Sometimes that credibility can also be very appealing to Body Temple. So then Body Temple ends up becoming in service of the order provided by the Mind Temple. So that, hey, they're ensuring that I can pursue my legacy, so I'm going to give them power. Or the Soul Temple, it's like, well, order determines outcome, right? So I'll never know my identity unless I'm willing to submit to authority, which is pretty sad if you think about it, right? It's always that point of view. So they submit to the Mind Temple. But the Heart Temple doesn't really actually submit to the Mind Temple. This actually happened to me just a couple of days ago. I had a balisong in my hand. It was a balisong trainer. I was actually victimized twice in a 24-hour period. It's not even dangerous. It can't cut anyone. It's not a blade. It's just a balisong. And where I was, it was legal for me to flip it in public and continue to practice my butterfly knife skills, my balisong skills. All of a sudden, some ENFJ comes up to me and he's like, hey man, it's pretty weird that you're flipping a knife in public. And I'm like, turning around to him and I'm like, this is not a knife. Flip it so that the so-called fake blade would be present and showing. Rubbed it against myself, attempted to cut my arm in front of him. Sir, this is not a knife. This is a blunt edge used for training. He's like, well, it still looks like a knife. It's still weird. You're still being weird. And I'm like, sir, do you know what I think is weird? People who are judgmental. That's what I think is weird. People who think they know best. I think that's weird. You know, that pride, deadly sin that comes from the mind temple as they continue to push their thoughts, push their way of doing things, push their order, push their authority for the sake of gaining validation for themselves and no one else on others. That ENFJ and I almost came to blows on the street because he just wouldn't let it go. And I just had no choice but to start mocking his TI inferior. And it's like, oh, look, it's the person who expects everyone else to listen to him, but he won't listen to anyone. Mr. Dismissive. Why does he think he has any value with anyone listening when he can't even humble himself to be the student? The man was caught in his tracks. He immediately kept his mouth shut and walked away. But then later, I had somebody confiscate my balisong because where I was actually presently, it's like, well, it can't look like a weapon, even though the rules did not say that. So apparently, Mind Temple knows best, because if it just looks like a weapon, I have the power to confiscate your property from you. Bullshit. Bullshit. And that's not how it works. So why does Mind Temple do this? Well, the God function of TI, I know best. Therefore, you need to value me. You need to listen to me because I know best, right? I know best, so you have to value me. And I'm just like, yeah, no thanks. I reject that notion entirely, right? Or the other Mind Temple perspective, the Tom Brady one. Extroverted sensing. I'm the top performer. I'm the best quarterback that's ever lived. Therefore, you owe me respect. Therefore, you got to listen to me. I know best. I am the best leader for your team, etc., which is essentially what happened at the Bucs, right? At least he proved he was a good person by taking salary hits so that other players could join his team, so he could have his crew, and they went all the way to the Super Bowl as a result of that. Good on Mr. Brady. That's how I would say Mind Temple should act. But otherwise, they don't. They end up acting like Gavin Newsom, the INFP governor of California, always thinking he knows best. Or Jay Inslee, another Mind Temple governor, oh look, of Washington State, right? Or Nancy Pelosi, or Ron Paul, or Rand Paul, all of them, Mind Temple. Mitt Romney, Mind Temple. Barack Obama, Mind Temple, over and over and over. All these people in positions of authority, exercising their so-called authority over the rest of us. Authority that they didn't earn, authority that they never fought wars for. Oftentimes you'll find it's Heart Temple that actually ends up not only starting the revolutions, but fighting the most in the revolutions. There was a Mind Temple World War I hero, actually. He'd get shot in his leg, but he cared so much about his men, he's in the hospital. He actually dressed up his leg and, against permission from the nurses and the doctors, snuck out of the hospital, went back out on the front lines, and once again saved his comrades and led them to victory within their little skirmish that they had, only for him to get shot again, basically, and ended up back in the hospital. They gave him their nation's version of the Medal of Honor for valor, for the courage of the NI God function, introvert intuition, personal freedom, having that fire, that passion for his comrades within the context of the heart temple, right? And yet all of a sudden, because of stories like that, stories of his heart temple passion, his heart temple valor, he ended up rising to power to lead a revolution against how his nation was unfairly treated as a result of World War I, right? And then he rose to power as a direct challenge to Mind Temple's power within the world. Isn't it any wonder that it's Mind Temple that actually runs the world now? Everywhere you go, including the man who actually does rule the world right now. He is an INFP, the leader of the Rothschild family, for example. He's an INFP, right? And he rules the world with absolute power as a result of controlling this faux monetary system that actually has no value. But somehow Mind Temple has convinced the rest of the world that, hey, it does have value when it doesn't. And they continue to usurp control over time. This ends up presenting a lot of problems. But hey, Mind Temple knows best, right? We should submit to their authority, right? As they worship at what they believe is the truth. And they worship, hey, we're the top performers, right? So you should give us power because no one can perform better than us. Yet, if you think about it, Mind Temple is the temple that fights wars the least. How many times do you hear about Mind Temple people, like, for example, John Kerry, right? Mind Temple, right? Or these other so-called American leaders during the Vietnam War running away to Canada instead of actually fighting and allowing themselves to be drafted during the Vietnam War, for example. Because apparently they're more special than the rest of us. Apparently they're the ones who have the authority. They're the ones who should have special treatment. So yes, I understand I'm presenting this lecture from a biased perspective, but you just cannot deny it. Heart Temple has natural enmity with the Mind Temple, as much as Soul Temple has natural enmity with the Body Temple. That's literally how it goes. Because Soul Temple is like, okay, nice legacy, you got their Body Temple, but did you have to sacrifice your humanity to get your legacy? Or Body Temple's perspective, it's like, no one's going to remember you for being a good person. So why bother trying to be a good person? No one's going to remember you. And then that they feel justified to do what they do. It's really frustrating. It's egregious, honestly. So as a result of all of these things, you have to understand Mind Temple God functions. TI. Always seeking validation. So they gather up for themselves knowledge and facts to give them that validation. They know best, right? Or extroverted sensing, having authority because they're top performers, where it's far more, shall we say, far more, like people are willing to accept top performers as authorities. People are willing to accept that Tom Brady is the foremost expert on quarterbacking because he's the best, right? Right? But that's not always true. That's not always true. But again, that's Mind Temple for you. Literally. That's how it works. That's what they do consistently. These are their God functions. Always consistently thinking they know best and exerting control, exerting power, exerting order over the rest of humanity to this end. And because of that, World War III, a great war, is coming. Unlike anything that we have ever seen. Because under Mind Temple control of society right now, do you think anyone's happy? Do you think anyone's happy in Western society? Fatherlessness is rampant. I lay that at the feet of Mind Temple, right? Fertility rates in both men and women are down. Lay that at the feet of Mind Temple, right? Children are being consistently killed or abused. I lay that down at Mind Temple, right? Consistently. Isn't it any wonder that the vast majority of pedophiles out there actually come from Mind Temple? It's just so ridiculous to me. So yeah, I got a problem with them in general. Now that doesn't mean all Mind Temple are evil like that. It doesn't mean that. But they have the capacity to manifest their evil in that way. Every one of them do. Every one of them have that potential. So it's so nice to see some members of Mind Temple be turncoats against the pre-established authority, to actually have an anti-establishment approach and join the ranks of the Heart Temple alongside Soul Temple and Body Temple to rise up against Mind Temple power and put it in its place. Isn't it any wonder that Charlie Chaplin, an INFP, okay? Charlie Chaplin, an INFP, a member of Mind Temple, in his Great Dictator film, where he delivered the Great Dictator speech, was calling out Mind Temple. He himself was calling out Mind Temple. He himself was egregiously ashamed of his own temple within his speech, talking about don't give yourselves to brutes who diet you, who regiment you and regiment your lives and use you as cannon fodder. He was projecting. He was projecting. It's all Mind Temple. Stalin, Roosevelt, Mind Temple. It's all Mind Temple. Churchill, while he was Heart Temple, complicit with the Mind Temple, as much as some members of Mind Temple can be complicit with Heart Temple. It ends up becoming a problem over time, over and over and over. Why? Because of the God functions. God functions, while, like if you're playing a game of Magic the Gathering, right, and you have your commander, it's in the command zone. You can cast your commander. It's a legendary creature that you can cast at any time in the game to bring it in and use its abilities anytime in the game, anytime you have the ability, the energy to bring it into play. Well, God functions work the same way. You may be an ESTJ who lacks TI, but you can still access the TI God function, right? You may be an INFP who lacks TI because it's TI demon. You still have access to TI through your God function, through your temple. And you could utilize its macro abilities to help you in the micro. That is the purpose of God functions. That is how they work within the 4 temples. So yeah, those are the God functions of Mind Temple, TI and SE. Introverted thinking and extroverted sensing. Utilized voraciously, subtly, overtly and covertly by ESTJs, INFPs, ENFJs, and ISTPs over and over and over. Is it any wonder that it's the ISTP archetype who has TI hero and extroverted feeling inferior, and it is literally up to them to actually shape or approve social norms ultimately, and then the ESTJs enforce those social norms, and INFPs create the policies that the ESTJs enforce. No wonder ESTJs are judges consistently. If you look at judges of courts, you're really just better off assuming that the judge that's going to be viewing your case is an ESTJ. I recommend using social engineering on the ESTJ. Hit their cognitive functions properly within your narrative. Hit their octagram, using push and pull energy from a social engineering perspective to hit their nurture, to give you a favorable outcome, right? Because you're most likely dealing with somebody who is Mind Temple, especially an ESTJ, who is a judge of your particular case. It's so ridiculous how that happens. So yeah. And then guess what? People are innately psychologically racist towards each other. And it's like, hey, if you're not part of the Mind Temple in crowd, we're not going to let you have power because the Mind Temple, part of its affiliative that supports its own self. People who have power are afraid of losing it, right? So they're only going to allow people who are just as power hungry as them because they know how to leverage it, as well as they even know how to have leverage over each other to the point of blackmail. That's why the people that fear blackmail the most are Mind Temple, but they're also the people who use blackmail the most. Mind Temple. Think about that. Think about that. Perhaps the things that happened at Comet Ping Pong were entirely orchestrated by Mind Temple. If the stories are true, you might want to think about that. Anyway, folks, thanks for watching and listening. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.